Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of the Alter Your Health podcast, your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our planet. What is holistic health? I mean, I feel like that's what this podcast has been all about for me, is understanding holistic health. Obviously, more than the food we eat and our exercise and our sleep. It's more than that, but that's what this conversation is focusing on. It's really focusing on food and exercise. And our guest is a master of both. He is a runner, a soccer player, and a nutritionist. So I'm really, really happy to share this conversation with our guest, Wilfredo Benitez. He goes by Will or Wilfredo. He's a professional nutritionist and an avid runner and soccer player living in Portland with his wife, who is studying to be a naturopathic doctor. They're going to make a dynamic duo, the two of them, I'm sure, when she's done with naturopathic medical school. So he's equipped with a master's degree in nutrition, and he helps people improve health and reach their goals by optimizing nutrition. Will has worked with people with many different concerns or goals, but his primary focus is working with individuals who are active. He is a performance-focused nutritionist and therefore works with athletes, whether they're at youth level all the way through professional level. Whether he's addressing health concerns, improving sleep, managing energy level, or recovery from injury, nutrition is, central. That's obviously, we know that, right? All of you listeners, I know that. That's why I love conversations that are just honing in on nutrition. So Will's individual approach to nutrition coaching, one that I really love, he says that he likes to meet people where they're at and take them where they want to be in a realistic and sustainable way. I think that is so important. And this conversation, we talk about that journey, we talk about goals, we talk about visions, we talk about action, we talk about nutrition, of course, and we'll give some really great kind of recommendations when it comes to the stepwise approach to sustainable habits in your health, in your life. So I really, really appreciated our time with Will and hope you do too. And just a reminder, if you're tuning in on YouTube or iTunes or whatever other podcast platform that is out there, and yes, these videos are on YouTube, so if you're more of a visual person, tune in to see me and Will. Otherwise, regardless of where you're tuning in from, my point here is I would love any comments, ratings, reviews, feedback in any way. Really appreciate any amount of feedback just to keep me focused and keep me evolving and doing things better. And that's what I'm all about. I don't want to settle for anything less than optimal. And what that means to me is just being open to continuing to expand and evolve and grow. And this podcast for me is a platform to do that. So with your help, of course. So thanks for taking the time to do that. Thanks for taking your time and energy to listen to this week's episode. And without further ado, why don't we all just sit back and relax, or maybe take this one for a run, whatever you prefer. But enjoy this conversation with Wilfredo Benitez.
Are you editing stuff?
Hopefully not too much.
All right, fair enough.
Hopefully not too much. I'm trying to keep this just like a part-time job, not the full-time job. But yeah, anyways, Will, welcome to the Alter Your Health podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. As I was telling you, I'm kind of wrapping up things in Portland and just in the last couple weeks. And it kind of hit me that Portland is full of amazing people, like we were already just talking about. And you being one of them, and from my perspective, doing some amazing stuff. And I was like, man, I got to sit down with some of these people before I'm gone. And here we are. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. Yeah, Portland is full of great energy, great people doing really fantastic things, even outside of the realm of like nutrition, and medical practicing. Just
Yeah.
in this larger health and wellness world, Portland is full of awesome people.
Right. I remember when I first moved up here 5 years ago, I had the first experience, and I've heard a lot of people say something along the similar lines, that like you look at somebody and they actually see you,
Right,
and they're actually like making an authentic connection with a stranger. So it's just a place where people like to connect and, collaborate and do awesome stuff, and also eat a lot of donuts and like
Right.
drink a lot of beer and kind of things that are questionable, but
Yeah.
but it's all part of the fun, I guess. I don't know.
Well, hopefully not doing it for too long or too much of it.
Yeah.
I understand, feeling it out and going to Voodoo to say you went to Voodoo, but
Yeah, exactly.
hopefully it's not a weekly thing for you.
Yeah, just got to get that pink box checked off the list, which I actually haven't done. I've
Okay.
never been to Voodoo, and I don't intend on it. But
You can just ask for the pink box. And just
yeah, hey, maybe I'll put my juices in there, my green juices.
There you go.
That's a good idea.
Just say you'll feature it on the podcast, but
Yeah.
open it up and it's just it's just some juices that.
Hey, that's not a bad idea. No. It's like the Trojan horse.
Right.
Anyways, so I'd love to give you some space to kind of share who you are in a nutshell, and kind of how you've come into the nutrition space, the athletic space, the performance kind of industry, which is kind of your niche, which is very cool. I haven't really connected with anyone like yourself. So.
Okay.
Cool.
Sure. Here we go. Yeah, I guess I'll touch on that in a second, but what brought me to nutrition? Before nutrition, it was teaching. I was a school teacher. That's where I went for my first master's degree back at Rutgers University in New Jersey, where my wife and I are from. And I thought I was going to be teaching for the rest of my life. That's obviously why you go to grad school. Yeah. Hopefully, at that point, that is your career. Alas, it was not for me. I love teaching. I love working with kids. I think that is going to be an important part of my career and my life moving forward. It was just the school system and all that kind of stuff that didn't jive with me. But also, my family, I guess, has had a long history of illnesses and disease and anything that you could think of, largely diet related. I couldn't diagnose it and say that that's 100% true, but from my perspective now, and then from my wife, who's also in the naturopathic program, we can look back and say, yeah, a lot of this would have been avoidable with certain lifestyle and dietary adjustments. And I think that's always influenced me. So even when I was, studying political science as an undergrad and studying education as a graduate student, nutrition and food was always part of my world. It might not have been my career path or even thinking about that being my career. It was a big part of my life. And then when my wife, then girlfriend at the time, started learning about holistic medicine and naturopathic medicine, which was like midway through her college career, nutrition started becoming talked about in a way that it wasn't just like dietetics. It wasn't just like the food pyramid. And I was like, whoa, there's like another area of nutrition. Like this could be a thing that you can actually counsel, people on and improve their lives. And it wasn't just like health school kind of stuff that you learn about in high school. And so when I learned about nutrition in that way, I became more open-minded to it. My wife and I decided to, ourselves explore different dietary approaches. We were both athletes, so I guess that's kind of fitting into why I decided to go that route. I was a runner and recreational soccer player. My wife was actually on the collegiate swimming and diving team as a diver, and then later kind of transitioned to doing triathlon. She's always been an athlete, and we both are still pretty athletic. But so for that reason alone, to kind of improve our athletics, with my family's health history in the past, my wife, then girlfriend Val, growing up in a family of kind of like more pescatarian kind of eating, I've always been introduced and intrigued by nutrition and food in general. And then, so yeah, when she started exploring the naturopathic medicine route, I learned about nutrition and said, yeah, that's actually something I'm really interested in. Let me see what teaching has for me. But then when she got into the school, we moved out to Portland, and I found out that I could study nutrition at that school. I just made it work.
Super awesome. So you dove in right then, head first.
Yeah, I came in and I was substitute teaching at the time. It was midway through the school year, so I wasn't going to find a full-time teaching gig in a state that I had just been in for like a week. So I just substitute taught, which was a lot of fun. I got to go around all the schools throughout the area. So I learned about all the schools, learned about the community, got to know the roads, which is really convenient. And then dove into all my prerequisite courses that I needed for the nutrition program. Awesome. Yeah, I was in it from the beginning.
Yeah, and were you all along running? I know that's your sport, right? Running. So.
Yeah. I was definitely. I mean, I've been running since high school. I can't really imagine a time I took a significant amount of time off from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how has nutrition and running kind of merged in any? Because it seems like that's where you are today, is kind of the intersection of those two hobbies now being your profession.
Yeah, sure. For me personally, it definitely merged. I wish it merged back in high school. I feel like I could have been a much better athlete. Maybe gotten a college scholarship or something to a smaller school. But it merged for me when I started exploring long distance running. I got into marathon running and ultra marathon running probably my junior year of college. And that's where like I was like, I've got to do something. I've got to make this work. And I wanted my first marathon to be a Boston qualifying marathon. So I was doing all I could to really make that happen. And so, yeah, it was, learning about everything, but nutrition was part of that to like kind of make that work for me and put together this comprehensive plan to get me to Boston.
So did it work? I mean, how being a runner and having that kind of through your life throughout, how did shifting your relationship with nutrition enhance or change your running, the experience of it and maybe the results in races or things like that?
Yeah, it made me a lot more open-minded. That's one of the biggest things that Val and I both experienced and would probably mention if you were to say, like, what did learning about food do for you? It made us look into food, think about food, look into things we didn't even know were food, right? And then like even question some things like, is that food?
That's a good question to ask. Is that food? Should I eat it?
It just like completely opened our minds and my mind specifically. In many ways, not even food related, actually. Like I think that delving into what nutrition is and how nutrition affects me and how the energy from food actually gives me energy and all that sorts of stuff has impacted relationships, has impacted what I want to do with my life. Like it's not just about that food anymore. But specifically with regards to running, yeah, I felt great when I actually started to clean up my diet a little bit. I always thought that I wasn't necessarily like an unhealthy eater. Looking back, like sure I was. But I did little things here and there, and even those simple adjustments, like including more water in my diet, including more, like consciously including more fruits and vegetables and not just like an apple, maybe half a banana, like a variety of a lot more colorful foods in my plate, has led to quicker recovery. I noticed that like within 2 weeks I was recovered quicker. Like excess, I'm not huge on weight loss and stuff, but certainly I was carrying some excess weight from the early years of college.
That'll make running really hard.
Exactly. So I couldn't really avoid that and I couldn't really ignore it. And sure, yeah, that started to go away within a few months too with some proper nutrition. And of course I was going like, I remember when a 5, 6 or 7 mile was like my long run. And now, and quickly after I started like delving into long distance running and fueling properly, it was a 10 mile was my long run, a 15 mile was my long run, eventually a 20 mile was my long run. And like, that was within months. And I was like, yeah, I wouldn't have been there if my diet was still the exact same way as it was when that 5 mile, I was like struggling through 5 miles. It just gave me a whole different kind of energy.
Totally. Well, I definitely want to dive into what the diet looks like and, your view of optimizing diet for performance and health and everything. But first I want to kind of take this chance to dive into the other factors that were enhancing your performance. Like, was there anything else besides food? How was your psychology? How was your mindset? How were relationships and things like, what else was changing as you were kind of coming into your optimal peak performance.
Yeah, sure. And maybe it was related to food too. And there's
it's all like an alchemical storm, and it just creates this masterpiece of a human. Right. But yeah, what were the other ingredients?
Sleep improved, and that could have been Val's doing. She definitely liked to go to bed earlier, especially in college. And I started to do that too. And I think that helped. Like, it was like a more quality kind of sleep that I felt. And of course it could be, I was running a lot more, so maybe I was more tired, but still that did happen. So I don't want to say that didn't impact my running. You mentioned psychology, and I was driven, and I don't know if I had been driven for anything at that point as I was for, first marathon running. Or even triathlon training, like that came right before the marathon, and I could see myself being really driven for that as well. That all happened after I really changed things up, and Val and I changed things up with nutrition. It was like, what is your goal? Like, I was actually asking myself that, and I never really asked myself that about academics, about getting into the graduate program. Like, I never really laid out a concrete plan and like envisioned that and like what I would need to do to get there. I've always been told to do that kind of stuff, like create SMART goals and do that.
Right.
And I was really involved in college, so I went through like certain trainings and groups and stuff, but I never actually put that into action like I did when I worked on my nutrition, when I was, envisioned my long-term, marathon goal. And I think that's because, like, innately, I love running. I love what it does for me and my psychology, my well-being. I love food and nutrition. I guess I have for a long time. But it made me a more driven, ambitious, not to the point where like I'm not going to complete anything, but like I can strive for things and actually envision myself getting there. It did a lot for me in many senses.
Excellent. That's awesome. I'm curious because you mentioned the Boston goal as being kind of one of the motivators. Like, I'm gonna qualify for Boston, my first marathon. Which did you?
Not for my first one.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, good.
10 minutes shy. I was like 10 minutes shy.
Damn. Yeah. Because I think it's really important on all aspects of our life to have these kind of visible goals to kind of move towards. But you talked about this inherent motivation that was driving you, and you weren't running for a team or anything. You weren't sponsored or anything.
No.
You weren't. You like what was driving you besides this vision of a goal of qualifying for Boston? Because I think that I can speak for myself. I sometimes lack motivation to even if I have a goal. It's like, who's watching?
Right.
Yeah.
For me, like in high school, I was a sprinter. I wasn't. You couldn't pay me to run long distance unless like my coach.
Unless it was a lot of money.
Right. Well, at the time, also long distance was like, coach tells you to go out and run 2 miles with your sprinting group, and you're like, no way. You do it. You suffer through it. You try to cut corners here and there. But high school, I wasn't thinking about that kind of stuff. My mom was always a runner. I think that she definitely influenced me. She wasn't doing anything like marathon. But she had goals, and I saw her complete them. I saw her do Race for a Cure, 3-day walk, and that wasn't necessarily running, but that was an endurance event for sure. I saw her do that. I saw her kind of train for that. I saw her train for 5Ks and half marathons and stuff, and that I think strengthened my own kind of passion for running and what I wanted to, how much I could kind of take on and also push through. For my goals, what for a runner, Boston's like the goal, right? Like for a long distance runner, you have destination races that you might want to do throughout your life, but if you're a long distance runner, if you like the marathon, or if you can push through the marathon, we don't like it. I think you want to do Boston. Like it's in some part of you. And so that was the same for me. Like it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to do Boston and that's going to be it. Like life goal checked and I can quit running. It was just something that I think would have ingrained. And I think by this point I didn't need it. Or like if you would ask me now if I needed this, I would say no. But at that point, entering into this long distance running field, I think that would have solidified my like place in long distance running. Like coming from sprinter to long distance running, I could say I made it if I qualified for Boston.
Sure. It
And
sounds like the ultimate rite of passage
exactly
into the running world.
Yeah, and I would tell anyone who was like in that transition phase, like, no, you don't need to qualify for Boston to like say you're a long distance runner. But when I was at that age and at that time in my life, I saw that as that. And so like I was doing everything I could to like say like, yes, I qualified for Boston. And once I put it out there too, like I put it out there pretty early that was what I wanted to do. That also kind of held me more accountable and kept me motivated. It was like, oh, all my friends know.
Yeah. Oh, when you say put it out there, you were saying I'm qualifying for Boston. You watch me. You watch this guy. He's going to be qualifying for Boston.
I mean, I didn't wear a shirt. I didn't go on podcasts and talk about it. But I was telling my friends and Val and my family and her family. And yeah, I was excited about it. I was talking about it.
Totally. I think that's really important. Is from what you're saying, it sounds like you just were acting as if it were already a reality and just kind of like living into that, which this is totally different, but I felt kind of similarly in a sense. When I was thinking about starting a podcast, it was kind of in my mind. Yeah. It was like, all right, I'm going to do this. And it's like all in my mind. But then I told somebody, and then it like became real. And then I started talking as if it were already happening. And then it was like, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
But obviously I wasn't like training for it. It was just a matter of
steps you have to do.
There are steps, and I was taking the steps. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Same, but very different.
right. But I love that when you said it, like it became real, like when you said it. And I found that to be so true in so many different ways. But certainly with running and certainly anything that you're really striving for, like I tell my clients that I work with from running coaching and then nutrition coaching as well, like, what's your why, right? And write it down, like actually reflect on it, and then like write it down and like tell it to someone. Like it's not just about the accountability thing, but it's about making it real. And like once you do that, like it's not just about it being in your head. Like, yes, I know you want to do X, Y, and Z, but when you reflect on it, when you tell people about it, when they support you, it becomes just so much more real. And like that could be one key piece that like they've failed maybe 3 or 4 times in the past, but they've never done that really important step. And it's been important for me. And so like, I think that it would kind of transform their next journey.
Totally. I think that's a really good point. And I often kind of coax that out of my clients and patients. And I say how I do that is often, so when you feel better, what are you going to do? You know, when you are no longer suffering from these symptoms, how is your life going to be different? What are you going to be doing? Because a lot of people don't know. And then there's no real authentic motivation to actually emerge from wherever somebody might be hibernating or living. So yeah, that's a really good point. Well, maybe we can kind of shift and dive into the meat of the conversation, which is like food.
Yeah, sure.
So you talked about growing up in a pescatarian, more or less, household. Is that what you?
That was actually Val.
Oh, Val.
Yeah, I was, coming from an Hispanic family, very much not pescatarian.
Okay.
Fish was part of it, but everything else was part of it too.
Got it. So, tell us about your nutrition evolution.
Sure. I mean, I don't really know where that necessarily would begin.
In the womb, maybe. I don't know.
I mean, no, obviously, like when you're in high school and you're in athletics, and I was a runner, track and field, both seasons, because on the East Coast you have winter track as well. Over here you don't. But track and field both seasons, soccer, kind of year round. I remember many times where I was doing like going to track practice, coming home eating, and then going to soccer practice. Like. Food, I would definitely didn't call it nutrition. Like that word was not part of my vocabulary. It was just food. But I knew that food had some, at some extent to some influence on my training. I don't know if I could call it training. But that is where I guess I started to think about food in that way, like a little bit more like, oh, I know eating this makes me gain weight. I know eating that might make me really tired. So in that kind of general sense, like I was thinking about food. But really when I got into college and that, kind of what I alluded to, like when I started to think about food and I guess at that point nutrition for my running, like my longer distance running, not just my sprinting in high school, that's really where I think it began. Like even when my family was dealing with all these health crises, and that happened, like that was probably starting way back in middle school or even younger. my family wasn't thinking about diet and how that is affecting my family. Like, sure, the doctors at some point might mention like, oh, avoid certain foods for the high blood pressure, but like food and nutrition wasn't really a thing, despite like numerous of those ailments being dietary related. I'm like 90% sure of that.
Sure.
But yeah, it was in college that I really started to kind of have what I feel is like where my true journey began with nutrition. And it was when I started to do the long distance running, but more specifically, Val and I both, because we were doing everything together, we both found through our research and through reading and watching documentaries and such, and even having friends who kind of were eating differently than we were, vegetarianism. That's kind of where it really started. Like, we made simple adjustments. I remember she was a big like burger person, and like one of the first things she wanted to change was giving up red meat. So I was like, done. Like, I don't cook red meat. Like, I'm fine doing that with you if you want me to support you. So we did that together. She was pescatarian. She didn't really drink dairy milk. She liked soy milk. And then, so like when we would have cereal together or whatever, like I would just have soy milk too. And I was like, oh, I love the taste of this. Like, I don't need dairy milk either. Like, I was kind of like doing whatever she did, because like we were new in the relationship. So we were making those like simple adjustments. And then when we came upon vegetarianism and actually tried to started to think about doing that together, like we both knew what that was, but when we made it something a little bit more real, it was like, we could try this out together and see what it does for us. We never looked back. Like, we just kept growing from that point on. And then eventually it evolved into like more, I like to think that it was like vegetarian / pescatarian to evolving to more plant-based, because I think that that's two different things. And then eventually like we attached a label to it and then decided to take the vegan step. Yeah. And so like, yeah, that's what we did back in summer 2012. And haven't, of course you have some slip ups, but we haven't looked back since. It's been great.
So the first step, if I hear you correctly, was just choosing to not eat red meat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it just kind of like took
off
from there.
Dairy milk, and then, we don't really eat meat anyway. Like, we don't really cook meat, so let's just give up meat and see exactly
on the menu,
and see how we feel. And so we kept fish. That really the only animal product was fish. We weren't even doing cheese, and so it was just fish for like 6 months, and that was the last step. And a couple key books influenced me. I was doing triathlon training for my first triathlon and getting into long distance running. So Rich Roll's Finding Ultra. And then Scott Jurek's Eat and Run, that spring of 2012 really influenced me. I thank my mom for getting me both of those books. And it was like, once I finished those books, maybe even like a quarter of the way through, I was like, yes, I'm doing it. Yeah. But let me finish my first triathlon and then I'll do it.
Sure. I'm curious about how those books influenced you. Was it just the fact that you were seeing these people who, it was like a model that you could follow, and you could think and trust that I can perform on this sort of diet and lifestyle?
Yeah, I think that was a huge part of it. Yeah, I mean, I really liked learning about like Rich Roll's transformation and like how he transformed from like this overweight, stressful lifestyle, like did not enjoy life really, to what we know him as now. Yeah. Like this full of energy guy, like this ultra athlete. And I was not going to be an ultra athlete, but like I loved learning about his story and how, and he was saying it in the book, like how this plant-based way of eating influenced that and like even maybe like allowed it to happen. And I was kind of feeling that too. Like I felt like in that moment, like I was like, yes, I guess I'm starting to begin my own journey with nutrition and athleticism, and let's see what happens if I do this too. Like I'm not going to be maybe an ultra athlete, but who knows what I'll become. And then Scott Jurek's book, like running was my thing, and it wasn't necessarily triathlon. So like I know that was Rich Roll's sport, but I connected on a different level to Scott Jurek. He like was including recipes in his book. There was something just about like how he talked about food and fueling his running, and like how he even like talked about during races like fueling with like these whole foods. And I was like, yeah, this is a lot more practical. Like here we go. Like now these are some like concrete steps, because I remember reading it in succession. Like it was Finding Ultra, Rich Roll's book, and then it was Scott Jurek, and like boom, like the picture was there, like the puzzle pieces were there, and I just had to finish my race that I was training for, because I was kind of scared to make any adjustments. And then the next day after my first triathlon, Val and I went vegan, and it was like done. Like that was it.
Awesome. Very cool. I'm really, really happy to hear how those kind of books can be, because I personally haven't had that sort of connection with another person's story. I always read it or hear it and think like, wow, that's really cool, but that's not, I can't necessarily relate personally. But I know that's obviously the reason why they, take the time and energy to write these kind of books, is to be an inspiration. And it seems like it was exactly for you.
Yeah. There were other things, right? There were documentaries. Food Inc. really got Val and I both started. I attribute a lot to Food Inc. And then like shortly after, it was Forks Over Knives. I mean, I think that Forks Over Knives did that for a lot of people who decided to go vegetarian or plant-based or vegan at that time. And then of course it became a lot larger than that documentary, right? But yeah, those two things really started things for us. And then once those books came out, and of course me being like this, like entering into this more endurance side of running, I was just like really connected to that.
Awesome.
To those books.
So once you dropped the red meat, what else changed? Because obviously that's a huge source of calories, right? That's like the source of calories in kind of a meat-based diet, is the meat. That's why it's meat-based. But so what did you fill that up in order to maintain your energy, your calories, your performance?
Yeah. Well, I knew like from reading and stuff, and I guess just from like conversation and this stuff generally in high school, even like meat is going to be a protein source, right? Like it's just called proteins, unfortunately enough. And so like I knew that yes, I would have to replace some of those proteins, like as an athlete too, like I had to replace those proteins. And because like my diet really wasn't that varied at that point, like compared to what it is now, it just wasn't. And so like I wasn't eating the quinoa, and I wasn't eating buckwheat, and I didn't even know what buckwheat was at that point. So I wasn't eating these other certain grains and pseudo grains and seeds and a whole bunch of nuts and beans and legumes and stuff. I wasn't eating that as much of that food, and like I said, half of which I didn't even know about them. So it involved a lot more reading. Like I was like, okay, we're gonna give up the meat, and then I started to read and learn about like what I can replace it with. And then so we started to go in like different grocery stores. Val had known a lot about these different foods, coming from a Russian family where buckwheat is like a huge pseudo grain in that culture. So she definitely influenced me. She had had tofu before. I never had tofu. I don't even know if I knew what tofu was, to be honest. So it was a huge learning curve for me when I decided to give up meat. And I was replacing it. Like once I started to learn about those foods, the foods that I chose to like add into my diet a lot more regularly did include tofu, lentils. Like it wasn't just, I grew up on like rice and beans. It's like a big part of any Hispanic kind of meal. But for the most part, it was like kidney beans and pinto beans and just like probably 3 or 4 beans that we would kind of gravitate towards. But lentils, I'd never had lentils before until I gave up meat. So it was like this really transformative time when I'm like learning about these different foods. Like how have I not learned about these before? So tofu was big. Sweet potato became more part of my diet. I got a lot of fulfillment from sweet potatoes, not just like regular potatoes, which I think are a great food. But lentils, unsalted, that was a big step. Unsalted nuts, not planters anymore. And then seeds, like a lot, like actually choosing to include sunflower and pumpkin seeds. At the time, still not, hemp or chia or flax seeds or anything like that, but choosing to choose or to include sunflower and pumpkin seeds was like a big step. Like I'm actually like eating these kind of foods. But things were working, like, as I said, like I was feeling better. I was sleeping better. I had a lot more energy. I had classmates. Like I was in a graduate program not long after that. And actually for that program, I had to take extra classes a year before. So I was taking on a lot of credits, doing a lot of running, and still had this abundance of energy outside of all of that. And so like I had people asking me like, what are you doing? And I remember like
give me some of that.
Yeah, I was asked so much that I actually started like an amateur blog in college.
Oh, cool.
At the time it was called That Vegan Runner. And then That Vegan Runner transformed into Eat, Run, and Done, which I kind of transformed that when I was here in Portland, like a few years later. But yeah, like it was actually working to that point, you know, my nutrition and running and all of that, where people were asking questions, and I was like, I didn't know about any of this. It's working for me. Maybe they don't know about any of it as well. Like, let me maybe educate, and because they're asking questions, this is like an easy platform to create. I remember, what was it, Blogspot or Blogger or whatever, and so I started that up and just kept sharing like whenever I had a new blog post out. But yeah, it was just including these more colorful and just really good for you whole foods and pseudo grains that I didn't even know about. Yeah. And like it was transforming my life. Like it really was.
Very cool. Very cool. I also really appreciate the fact that you felt so inspired to share. You took it to the next step to create a blog and just put it out there. And it really speaks to the fact that that's how you were touched, through reading someone else's story. So it's like,
I was reading a lot,
you're gonna, take what you were given and kind of like pay it forward. And I'm sure it has touched, it continues to touch, your work and your words, other people, to show people, hey, like I feel great and this is what I'm doing, and maybe you can feel great too. So, which brings me to the point, do you think at this point in your life, and having, gone through the nutrition program and whatnot, do you think that this shift that you had is the shift that would benefit everybody? In other words, should we all go vegan?
Oh man.
Oh,
I could potentially lose a lot of clients if I answer this question.
I know, I feel the same way. Listen to him.
So I since I mentioned that, I don't tell all my clients to eat vegan. Yeah. That is definitely not the first thing that comes out of my mouth. So, with clients that I've been with for some months, it hasn't even come out of my mouth yet. I don't even know if they know I'm vegan. But I do think, so to answer your question, I do think that eating more plant-based, eating more whole foods plant-based, will change people's lives, will change the lives of our country and our society, and that of other Western cultures out there. Should everyone go vegan? I'd love that, right? I'd love for people to go vegan for other reasons, for the animals, and because for us, clearly, I think from this conversation you could gather that it started with health and with sports, right? Like for Val and I to kind of transition into this, but it developed well into other stuff. It developed into like our compassion absolutely grew for the environment, for the planet, for the animals, like for other reasons people go vegetarian or plant-based or vegan. And so like for those reasons, it'd be great for people to explore it, right? And maybe not attach a label to it if they don't want to. Maybe it's not 100% right away, but to just explore that, I think would be a revolutionary thing that is really easy and also a lot easier now than it ever has been. And I know I say that in a Portland bubble, but I truly do believe that even outside of Portland, that it is easier than it was 10 years ago. Does everyone need to? Again, I think that it'd be great for them to explore it. I think that if they had some guidance, if they took gradual steps through that change, depending on where they're coming from, where they're starting at, I think it would help. Because I hear so many, and I've heard for many years, so many stories about I tried this, I tried that, and it just didn't work for me. And then I got into the nutrition program at the naturopathic school and started to learn about nutrition from a different standpoint, right? And I was like, well, clearly you're just not doing it right. Because I truly believe that if you had some guidance, whatever wasn't right, whatever didn't work, could just be tweaked. Like,
and when you say you're not doing it right, you're saying veganism or plant-based.
Yeah, or even if they were talking about vegetarian, because this is like what other people are saying, like that it didn't work for them. And so I think
the first question is, what does it mean for a diet to work? Right. How do you what do you say?
I mean,
what do you think?
At the time, I don't think, when I first started to hear that response or even just that saying, I don't think I was asking questions, but I think now what they probably meant was, I'm getting stomach aches, I'm not sleeping well,
Just still symptoms. Still,
Yeah, exactly. And one, there's some
later.
transitional things. Like Val and I definitely had to adjust to the whole extra fiber in our diet because we were coming from a place where we didn't have that much fiber in our diet. So of course, it like what your journey is and the changes that are made, you have to look at your baseline. Like people's journey is going to be completely different depending on where they're starting and how extreme they're going with their changes and how fast they're going. So yeah, like if I can see where like the stomach issues and all that kind of stuff that comes with GI could turn people off to it and say like, well, that's not working for me. Like I was fine before that. Now this stuff happens. But clearly, if that's the case, and I wasn't doing it, I wasn't having those conversations with people about, why am I having this? Why is this a symptom that I'm feeling right now? Throughout this change. So I think that if people had some guidance around those changes and just even if it's a friend, it doesn't have to be an expert or a practitioner of any sort. I think that it would really help with making those changes kind of stick. But what I tell more, not what I tell clients, but more what I tell people when I give like presentations or talks, it's just gradually get more whole foods plant-based. I think that should be the kind of goal to just achieve better health and wellness. Because honestly, I actually do believe this, that when you start to do that, when you kind of take those baby steps, maybe they're baby steps at first, you're becoming more open-minded. You're learning about different foods. Like if you go meatless Monday, that was a huge thing, and I loved it, and it still exists. You start learning about other foods, right? Those people are like, oh, tofu, like that's an actual, like for me, like that's an actual food. Like I can actually eat that. It could replace meat. What? And then tempeh, that could almost feel like meat. You learn about these different foods, and then it doesn't stop. You don't stop learning once you start. And so like just taking those baby steps, I think could be really key in just transforming your life, but also transforming your family's life. And then of course, when we get more large scale, the world. I mean, I really do believe that could have that impact.
I loved what you were talking about when it came to your experience of compassion inside of yourself shifting as you cut out animal products. And I know that's for sure. I used to want to be a surgeon, like cut people open, and then I went vegan, or then I stopped eating meat. And now when I watch surgery, I like cringe and I can't really do blood and guts anymore and like violent movies, like kind of like I have to turn the other way. And I think that we do kind of inherently start to connect with our essence in a way. I mean, I don't know how to describe it with words very articulately, but I think that connection, so to speak, is really something that the whole collective is yearning for, So when we're talking about, when I'm often talking about dietary shifts, I'm talking about like the individual level, but it's, it touches, of course, the family, the community that person is in, and then, it ripples out really quickly.
Oh yeah. So, I mean, I can attest to that. Like my mom's completely vegetarian now. My dad has vastly increased his vegetable and fruit and whole foods intake. Like it's extraordinary. And it's so, I mean, my sister's doing a lot better with everything, and I'm only hoping that her children, my niece and nephew, are, that's that generation, right? That they're going to be influenced by all of what they're seeing in their family in a way that I wasn't, or I was influenced, but maybe the wrong way. But I'm hoping that, that influence trickles down, and it just creates a more open-minded with regards to food and animal rights and all that kind of stuff, an open-minded generation about it all.
And that's what I always continually remind myself is it just takes one generation of open-minded individuals, and then like we're, I don't like thinking about this all too much, but it's like we just need to wait for some people to die, and that's the thing about life is people do die, and like there's this newness that's happening, and I also like to envision a new generation of really just openness. Yeah. Because I love where you're coming from, rather than saying do this, do this, do this. It's just be open. And like literally just be open, because when you go to the grocery store, the meat counter is like 0.2% of the grocery store, right?
Yeah.
And then, the junk in the middle, but there's a whole nother, like a whole nother geography of our grocery stores, that you could find some beans and lentils and tofu and these things that you didn't know existed. So I like the encouragement to just be open and not being dogmatic. You are not, like, you are the most like gentle and inviting person. So that's something that personally I'm striving toward, because I try to, sometimes I like just try to, exercise some tough love.
Yeah.
But sometimes people need gentle love, Sometimes it doesn't need to be tough. So thanks for bringing that. Yeah.
You're welcome. With my family in the beginning, and I think everyone kind of does this with family, even regardless of how you yourself eat, like it's definitely tough love, right? Like I remember like having, and even Val with her friends and stuff, having some more serious, I don't want to say hostile, but not gentle love conversations about like what food is doing to them and what soda is doing to them. And it was like almost to the point where like, you better not eat that anymore or else. Right. And that, obviously that did not work like that. It made me more angry when like they would continue to do it, so it was like, what am I doing? And it took like probably at least a year of that to like, just kind of back off and like, just do your thing, right? Like just, you guys do your thing. I hope you drink more water. I hope you can maybe at least get rid of the soda. And then I'll do my thing. And then once I made that shift, like, and Ron and I kind of did that together because we realized we were both doing it to like our loved ones. They started to like ask questions. Like they started to ask us questions, and they weren't doing that before. The only questions that they would ask was like, what can't you eat? So that when we were going over for dinner, they won't like make us the wrong food. But once we kind of backed off and just let ourselves be a model, they were like, so, why are you guys eating buckwheat? Or like, why lentils over this? Like, is that better for you? And they were just curious. And then we were just like, just answer the question and not get too excited to like push it on them even more. We're just like, answer that question and just say like, hey, you should try it. Like, we'll actually even cook dinner for you tomorrow. And then we would. And then they would just have a delicious meal of foods that they wouldn't, maybe like 2 or 3 foods that they would never have had before. And they loved it. And then now I can say that my family's eating a completely different way.
Amazing. That's
it
awesome.
Really is.
Very inspiring. It reminds me of something that came up in another interview. We were talking about this dynamic of either pushing people or pulling people.
Right.
And
I like that.
It's like no one really likes a pushy person.
Right.
But when it's very kind of cliche that you just be the change sort of thing.
Yeah.
But you just really anchor in yourself, like who you are and why you're doing it, and just stay true to yourself. And people are pulled towards the truth or towards something that is, light and magnetic and just has, more energy about it. So I'm always reminding myself to, be more amidst of the pull mentality and just kind of being true to myself rather than going around telling people what to do.
Right.
Which, sometimes doctors that's their job, even though it shouldn't be their job. But in our society, like, some people think that doctors are the people who tell people what to do.
Yeah. Patients even want that. They're like, just tell me what to do, and I'll try and do it. We'll see. But I'm curious to know what your experience is, because I don't think that when people are told what to do, there's not really any sort of sustainable effect, right? That's when compliance becomes such a huge issue, because it's like, I told you to do that, but you're not doing that. You wanted to be told what to do, but why are you doing it? So that's where, like, some sort of intrinsic, inherent motivating factors come into play. So, yeah, and that's actually one of the key reasons that I kind of stopped offering meal plans. Like, coming from my own kind of realm, like meal plan is what a lot of people think, especially when I decided to enter and almost solidify my niche as kind of sports and performance nutrition, working with athletes and just other active individuals who might not identify as athletes per se. But when those people think, and I was that kind of person, when they think of a nutrition or a dietitian or a sports nutritionist, they're like, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to contact this person and get a meal plan. And I didn't think that too, like coming out of the program. I knew there was so much more to it, but I did offer meal plans. Like I knew that was what people were going to want. I knew that, from a business standpoint, that could be decent money, like a lot of work going into it, but you can charge a little bit more for that. But that was kind of, there's a compliance factor there. Like, it's just, I'm going to create this for you and you're just going to do it. Yeah, I'm going to do it in my way. And so, like, it is different. Like, it is like a more food as medicine approach. Like, I do think that it would have been good for that anyone who's going to follow a meal plan that I make for them. But if they fall off the, like, okay, I'm going to follow this day in and day out for whatever, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, they're not going to have learned anything, right? Like, they might feel better, ideally, because that's what my work would have been, is to make them feel better and get them through their towards their goals. But they wouldn't have actually learned anything that I think could be taught to them from that coaching process. And that's why I love that coaching process. Like, when someone reaches out and they're like, I just want to, or when I see an opportunity to get a new client, but it's just they're looking for a meal plan, I'm like, no. Like, I actually started to offer, instead of meal plans, a dietary guide where, like, I'll put together certain meals and options that are going to be great, but I'm going to, like, throw that at you with some coaching in there, and set you up with some goals along the way to actually make this manageable and achievable. Because I think that allows me to kind of still build a relationship with my client. And that's really important for this whole, I'm a nutrition coach for a reason. Like, that is a fundamental part of a coach, and that coaching relationship is the relationship piece. And that meal plan is just like a really cold, like, here it is, do it, good luck. I'll check in a week and maybe make an adjustment. But there's no relationship building there. There's no and me coming from, like, a teaching background, like, that educational piece is huge. And so I've always wanted that going into, like, this field of being a nutritionist, is making sure that I'm empowering and educating anyone that I work with or talk to, that they eventually, like, won't need me. They can do everything that we've worked on for however many weeks or months and improve their lives, of course, depending on what their goals are and how far they need to go. But my goal is that they don't need me anymore. And I think with a meal plan, that's just not a realistic thing for me. Like, I think that they will stop that eventually. They will need to find another meal plan or work with another person, and I don't want to kind of perpetuate that. So, yeah.
You can teach a man to fish, or you can give him a fish, right? It's like,
right.
It's just kind of a basic tenet, which makes a lot of sense. And so when it comes to the educational aspect, how do you do it? Like, where are you coming from in terms of, we kind of set the foundation of getting more plant-based, but are you generally talking to people about, like, what macronutrients are and why you need this or that? Or is it, I'm sure it kind of, varies from individual to individual, but.
Yeah, it definitely varies. My first step is getting, like, a health intake form, just like probably many nutritionists and practitioners, would get. And in that, like, I see their goals, right? I see what their, maybe it's a concern, like maybe it's an actual health concern or issue that they are, I'm maybe not directly addressing that. That might be a little bit out of my scope. But I'm improving their health and wellness in a way that maybe it does help their true health concern. But I'm seeing that. I'm seeing their goals that they have, whether it's weight related, whether it's I want to finish this certain race or certain, I want to improve my athleticism and X sport. And then I'm also getting from that intake form more information about their health history and what supplements they're on and what their foods. Like, that's a section that I kind of instilled in my intake form, was like, what are you eating a lot of? Do you cook often at home? Do you what meals do you eat? How open are you to change? What foods are you, like, completely averse to eating or trying or whatever? And so I'm gathering all this information about, like, where they're coming from. And then once we have that like initial face-to-face or initial video or phone call, we're talking about all of that. Like, I'm extrapolating as much from them, from that, like with that health intake form as, like, a resource, to learn about what they're coming from their own words, not just written on paper. So I'm learning a lot about them in my initial consult. And then once I do that, yeah, there's a lot of education around like, okay, like you're eating like this, your goal is this. Like they might be, and again, like you said, it definitely varies from person to person. But they might be on like complete opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of like you eating like this. And they know that, right? That's why they're coming to me.
Yeah.
But like them eating like this is not going to get them to that goal, or it's going to be a really, really hard, full of injury kind of journey.
So you're just connecting someone with where they are and the reality of what is, kind of, it sounds
Yeah,
like, which
yeah.
seems like a powerful perspective to have. You're like you're like pointing someone out where they are on the map, and like
yeah, and like these are the steps you kind of need to take, and I'm going to guide you through that. Like it might sound daunting, and again, it varies. So, but for some people, it's like from here to here, and it's like it's okay. Like that's why I'm here, right? Yeah. I'm going to guide you. We're not going to make that jump overnight. Mm-hmm. We're not going to do that. Yeah. We're going to take baby steps. That's why I create goals for them or with them. Give them a goal sheet after we've created that to kind of have them guide or have them hold themselves accountable for their journey. And, you know, I'm checking in, of course, but they're doing a lot of the work. I think that that's important as they can reach out to me if they need extra accountability or if they have questions and stuff. And I'm going to reach out to them to check in. But I think a large part of it is like, and that's why I asked for what their commitment level is, because I'm going to depend that you are invested in this, like enough so where like I don't need to hold your hand necessarily the entire time. Yeah. I will guide you. I will hold your hand when necessary, but not from A to Z, right? Like maybe at certain letters of the alphabet along the way. And I think that they responded well. I
Awesome.
think for the most part, that has been a sustainable way to get people to their goals in a way that gets their adjustments to actually stick. And that's the point of what I do. It's like, I'm not here to just,
you're not like a weight loss coach, like fit into the dress kind of thing for the wedding.
I don't want to be, you know, if someone comes to me, I'm going to educate them about that and like really talk to them about what their goals are and how it could be more long-term. But I don't want to be this really short-term, because that's not, I don't think, what food and nutrition should be. I think that it should be.
Totally. I think it has been that.
Right.
You know, the popular nutrition, popular diet world, it has been this kind of like, you know, week-long, month-long kind of thing. Yeah. But that's not what we're talking about, clearly. I think people understand, right? Like, people understand that by now. I'm curious just to kind of touch on some nuggets of information around performance and athletics particularly. What are some tips, or how does the nutrition program change for someone who's like day to day just kind of, you know, running a half hour a few times a week and, you know, low level exercise, or like, you know, the standard exercise to someone who's training for a marathon or more? Like what changes in their nutrition program? You know,
you could probably, like, I could ask you that question, and what you write down or tell me is probably true. Like, you could probably guess the things that will change.
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is calories, right? We're going to be burning more calories. And given that during exercise, the primary source of fuel is carbohydrates, we want more carbohydrates.
Yep.
I'm
interviewing you now.
I know. I know. Yeah, but I guess what I'm really more interested in, like personally, like on a selfish reason, as well as kind of I don't yet fully understand, is when it comes to, you talked earlier about recovery, and you know, I know that recovery is kind of the most important thing for anyone training. And you talked about eating colorful, rainbow, which obviously, like, you know, the vitamins and minerals that entails, as well as carbohydrates. But any other like recovery tips? Because
yeah, sure. But I'm gonna get to that. But so the calories, right? That's gonna be a huge part. It's like, are you eating enough? You know,
totally.
Like, I'm a 5K runner and I want to get to a marathon. Well, realize that like not just your physical training is going to change, like your nutrition has to change to do that. Like you're expending a lot more energy and demanding a lot more of your body. And so like, so from just a caloric standpoint, that has to match what you're expending. And then from a nutrient standpoint too, and that's where like recovery kind of comes in. It's like, if you are doing so much more than what you've been used to, or maybe have never done before, it's not just about like, because you can get calories from anything, right? Like if you can get really, really calories from really bad sources. So it's not just the calories; it's like the actual nutrients, like eating nutrient-dense foods that are actually going to be fueling that recovery, like allowing you to recover and do what you have to do the next day. Because that's where the growth and adaptation happens. So I think that's a huge part of training, is how well you recover. You're not going to be your best self and perform your best if you aren't recovering well. You can put all the right training and follow the best coach in the world, do exactly what he or she or they says, and if you aren't recovering well, you're limiting your potential. You might finish whatever you're setting out to, but you're limiting your potential. And so like the nutrients and eating colorfully and all that comes into it. There have been many instances though where, you know, supplements do play a part in how I coach people. You know, depending on where they're coming from, if they're already using protein powders, I'll guide them in maybe better protein powders than what they're maybe have been using or used in the past. I'll try to get their protein, if not all the way, mostly from whole foods. I really do believe that. I'd rather you get protein from whole foods versus just a protein powder. But other supplements that I've used often, and they're natural, right? That's where like my training at the naturopathic school comes from, or has allowed me to learn about, is using natural supplements to aid people's athletic efforts and their recovery. So we're talking about
no amphetamines.
No.
Oh man.
Turmeric is super popular with my coaching. Like I encourage that often. I you know, twice a week I'm at a physical therapy clinic, and while I don't necessarily work with their patients all the time, I have seen turmeric work like wondrously with in helping actually injured, not just like, oh, I've got a little soreness or tightness or whatever, like actually injured, like they're seeing a PT kind of injured. I've seen turmeric work. So that's something that I suggest often. Tart cherry, you know, tart cherries worked for me. I learned about that back in college, and I started using it. I had some, like, as I was entering the long distance running, I myself went through some like niggles in my, I wouldn't call them injuries, but these niggles that are just kind of persistent. And I used tart cherry to kind of, I was like, oh, I learned about it, and let me just give it a shot. And in no time at all, everything was gone. Like I was feeling like it was not an issue. And I'm like kind of rubbing my knee, because like I'm remembering that was an issue for like all of high school, for the first 2 years of college. It was like, oh, yep, there's my knee thing. Like it just always came up and flared up at some point. And then it actually hasn't been an issue since. And I think at this point, I attribute it to my largely anti-inflammatory kind of way of eating. But when it disappeared at first, I was just doing, the only real change was tart cherry supplement. And that's what I read about it, was like how it's just like this really potent anti-inflammatory source of nutrients. And so that's something I pass on to my athletes that I work with too. Beets, you know, I encourage eating beets for the nitric oxide kind of effects that happen, and how that can affect their actual training, but then also their recovery, because it's good for just general, you know, people as well, not only athletes, improving blood flow and oxygen flow. And so I encourage the use of, yes, beetroot powder, but also just eating whole beets if you can, if you like it. So any kind of, I do talk about supplements, but they're always more natural versus not.
Well, yeah, the supplements that you talked about are foods.
Right,
you know,
exactly.
There's this
foods,
kind of spectrum. It's like we've, you know, kind of supplemented, we've kind of shoved some foods onto the supplement shelf, but they're actually foods.
Yeah, and
know?
that's like with like a protein powder. That's why, like, that's probably the only one that's not a whole food. And it's just like, I'd rather you just like grind up your own peas and then just like sprinkle that on your
So on that note, when does, I mean, it's a whole conversation, right? A whole nother can of worms. But there's a lot of endurance athletes who are on this kind of really low protein, low fat kind of diet, right? So
low protein and low fat. Okay.
Yeah. So like, I don't know, like an 80-10-10 kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that real quick? Maybe I'm just curious to know what you think about that sort of thing. And, you know, are these people running themselves into the ground and creating protein deficiencies, and like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that potentially, right? It's like one of those like lawyer questions. Like, it depends. And it does, really.
Safe.
Yeah. What's their, how much are they actually expending? You know, like, do they actually need, and the whole 80-10-10 thing, even just percentages, you know, because 80-10-10 is 80% carbs, 10% of fat and protein. And I don't say that for you, I say that for our audience. But with percentages, what I've learned quickly was that the percentages will always equal 100. It's a matter of like how much protein, like in terms of like grams, right? Like the actual quantity of these certain foods are you actually eating.
Got it. So if someone's eating like a 4,000 calorie diet, then they're getting then they're 10% of protein.
It's a lot of protein versus like
amount.
You know, a 2,000 calorie diet.
That's a really good point.
Right. So
it's like duh.
But so that's where like someone's like, if someone just comes up and says like, hey, I'm eating 80-10-10 like X, Y, and Z after. Like, I'm like, well, what does it actually mean? Like, how much protein, fat, and carbs are you actually eating? But yeah, so it depends, right? It is possible that they are not getting enough protein to actually like recover properly or to get them to their goals, right? If they're like a, I don't know, body lifter, is that right? Bodybuilder, strength, athlete, lifter, person. I don't usually work with those athletes, but so like it depends on what the actual sport or athlete is, or, you know, what they're doing, and then what they're actually how much they're actually eating of each macronutrient. But it's definitely possible. Like, they might feel fine in the end. The body's going to do wondrous things to kind of cope with what it's given. If it's not given, like, if it's like a huge cut, and sure, you might get symptoms kind of right away. But if it's kind of gradual, it will adapt. Whether or not that is sustainable or whether or not it will completely start to shut down in a year or 2 or 3 years is kind of questionable, right? So the thing with like just not eating enough calories, like you will, you know, as you know, like you will see some weight loss, but eventually that will shut down. Like, you will stop seeing weight loss. Very likely you will see weight gain. So I think that's the same thing with like, you know, with these macronutrients. It's like, at first, if you've done it gradually, you might see some progress and some, you know, something that like keeps you going, like, hey, this is working, this is right for me. But then, you know, those injuries might come along, or you might be sleeping poorly, and you know, you might be training on dead legs thinking that that's what you're supposed to be doing, because like, yeah, I'm an endurance athlete, I'm supposed to always be tired. It's like, no, like you're not recovered properly, like something's wrong here. Cool. And so yeah, it really comes down to like, you know, quantity wise, like not just that percentage thing. 80-10-10 though is not something that I followed or encourage people to follow necessarily, but for some people, as you know, like it has worked for them. That's where like a whole like bio-individuality kind of comes into play too.
Absolutely.
So like anything like percentages and numbers that we like talk about is very much generalized. Like, it's definitely going to depend on the person.
I never pegged you for the kind of guy who stuck by macros.
No.
And I think that's like you already, you know, whacked upon. It's like those percentages don't give you any information unless you're, you know, looking at the individual foods and the quantity of each.
Right.
So wrapping things up with you, Will, what would you say in terms of kind of a broad stroke encouragement or words of advice that would be applicable to kind of the masses when it comes to a lifestyle shift along the lines that we're talking about here?
Yeah, I like this question because it's something that I kind of leave groups with often, and even not, I don't want to say leave clients, it's something I mention to clients all the time, but like if I'm like doing a presentation, I'll mention this almost all the time, which is water's huge, right? Like it's crazy. Like we joked about like in my nutrition program, like how often we're going to talk about or say like drink more water, eat more fruits and vegetables.
It doesn't get old, right? People need to hear that every day.
Or like some iteration of that so many times. Yeah. But water's huge. Like I wish I knew about the importance of water. Not just like, oh, I get thirsty, I need to drink water. Back in like high school, like it would have just transformed how I felt, and sure, my sports and athletics too, but like everything. So many people, way too many people are going around dehydrated. Like their body's used to it. They don't feel the symptoms anymore, or they do, but they have had to cope with it because they have to live a life. they've learned, and their body has learned to numb the symptoms, and they just go on thinking that this is their normal self.
We are incredibly adaptable. The body is. So we adapt to whatever stress on whatever level, and dehydration. Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. So like I'll tell clients, like, one of the first goals, even if it's not something that they really need to work on, I'll include it in like their goal sheet, is like, you need to drink more water. Like, up your water intake by like 10 ounces for the next 2 weeks, and we'll just kind of go from there. And they'll tell me, like, after a week of doing it, like, I feel great. And they're doing other things too. But I'm like, yeah, like, no wonder you feel great. Like, I'm sure that water thing is help, because you just went from like 40 ounces to 50 ounces.
I was just envisioning like a double-blind, placebo-controlled study with water, with water intake. And I mean,
that would be phenomenal.
It's hard to blind that.
Right. But I would love something like that, where it's like, let's just see, like, if water was the only thing that changed, what that would do for people.
Yeah.
And we could see that just on an individual basis, right. But I would love a study on that.
It's like we, on some level it'd be cool, but it's like we know how powerful being fully hydrated is.
Yeah, I mean, I go to PT clinic twice a week, and they're giving their their patients water on the tables, because they know how important that is for like flushing things out and making sure they're not sore. And I'm like, yes, water, like, do that at home too. Like, water is so important for numerous things. So that's one of the first tips that I would kind of leave with, is up your water intake. Like, even if you think you're drinking enough water, just drink a little bit more, or start to measure it, right? Like, actually go a day or two. If you're an athlete, do it on a long run day, do it on a workout day. If you're not an athlete, just go a day or two of measuring your water intake and actually see how much water you drink. Or just like write it down at the end of the day. Like, try to think about all the times you drink water that day, and just write, so you don't change things up, subconsciously or even purposefully, and write down how much water you drink that day. And you might be appalled by how little water you drink. And hopefully that's not the case, but largely it is. And then I advise, go around with a bottle. Like, if you don't have a bottle, and it's not like a Poland Spring kind of plastic bottle, go and invest in a reusable bottle. It'll be probably one of the best investments you could make that day, month, year, potentially for your life. I don't know, but like,
super easy,
exactly,
super cheap,
super easy.
Super simple.
When you think about how long a water bottle can last, it is the cheapest thing. It really is.
Yeah.
So that's one tip, and I think it's a really big one, which is why I spent so much time on it. The next one would be increase your fiber. I tell people to just strive for minimally, because if we look at like the recommended daily allowance or intake, RDA or RDI, would be like 25 grams for women, and then like 30 or 35 for men. I just say, regardless of your sex, 40 grams. Strive for 40 grams of fiber per day. And because if you do that, if you strive for that, if you are achieving it, you're only doing that by eating more whole foods. You're eating more whole foods, plant-based, by just doing that. Like, yes, you might be eating everything else, but you might be you will be eating more whole foods, which eventually, and even maybe right away, you're going to be minimizing all of the junk. And I'm not just talking about like animal products, coming from a vegan, right? But I'm talking about all the excess sugar, all the high fat, highly processed foods. That's just junk, regardless of what label you call yourself. So if you're striving for 40 grams and maybe going above that, like if you're already at 30, maybe you're striving for 50. You're going to be cutting all of that because there's no room for it, right? Like if you're increasing that much fiber in your diet, you're full. You're full from all these healthy foods. You're not going to even you're starting to change your taste buds eventually. Your body's starting to adapt to it. You're not going to want the junk, right? Like, and you're going to eventually see, you're like, I actually don't crave sugar that much anymore. Like, I don't need to have a dessert after every dinner. Like, eventually I'll go out and enjoy something, but I don't need it all the time. Like, what's changed? You're eating way better just from focusing on that one number. So like, I'll tell people, like, I don't love focusing on numbers too much. Like, and that's coming from a sports nutritionist, right? But the one number, if you're going to focus on something, would be your water intake, right? The ounces, but the fiber, how much fiber you're actually getting from your diet. So I think that's really important. And getting it or even just making steps to achieve that can truly be life-changing for how you feel, like, for your health and wellness. Yeah. Because the only way to do it is by increasing more whole foods. And that's like what I want you to do in the first place.
I love that. You're kind of sneaking it in there. You eat more fiber. And that's like because people are like, fiber. Well, he didn't say fruits and vegetables. So, okay, that's I can do that.
Right. And,
obviously not a fiber supplement, I'm presuming.
Right, so I'm following it up with like, it's not Fiber One bars. It's not, sorry if Fiber One is a potential sponsor of you guys. It's not, fiber powders or supplements, that you can buy in the aisle. No, it's whole foods. Like I am mentioning that.
Yeah.
Like if you avoid that stuff, the only other place is to get it through Whole Foods. So just do that. Eat your favorite fruit more. Eat your favorite vegetable in different ways. Join a CSA and figure out something to do with all the extra vegetables that you're now getting, right? Like there's just other steps that I'm going to, guide them to and like actually share with them so they can actually achieve that. But that largely that is the one number that I have them kind of focus on because it truly would be, it's changing. It's transformative, just like upping your fiber intake.
Totally.
You're doing what I want you to do just by focusing on a number.
Yeah. So. I know. I don't like focusing in on any one thing, but if we were to do that, I think fiber and water, I mean...
it's good that that it's both, right? Because
right, you don't want fiber without the water.
If you're increasing your fiber intake and not drinking enough water,
yeah,
bad news bears. But doing both is kind of nice that they go, because they go hand in hand, so...
Cool. Well, Will, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you for imparting the wisdom and...
Appreciate it. Oh my gosh. I might have to edit that one out or something.
All right. Well, peace and love. And until next time.